Thank you. I mean, not that I don't want to listen to the other gentlemen, but definitely. Are you speaking first?
Yes, I believe so.
Great.
My name is David Farrington. I am the minister of this wonderful, lovely church.
Amen.
And it is my pleasure to welcome you here and to call for a blessing on this congregation, as it were. So let us be in prayer. Creator of all goodness, Spirit of life and love, we thank you for this gathering of caring persons, and we call your blessing upon it. For we are a people of varied backgrounds, ages, social and economic means, races and creeds. Yet we are united this day under your loving providence in service to the poor, the hungry, the naked, the imprisoned. We ask that you bless us with an atmosphere of loving kindness, and thereby enable us to multiply our energy such that the sum of 10 of us and 10 more of us is miraculously greater than 20. To hear not only what is said, but also that which goes unsaid. And to walk in the slippers of those with whom we disagree, such that we might come to understand not only their view, but how they came by it. And then mine from it those nuggets of gold we might otherwise have missed. We ask that you bless us with a renewed sense of enlightened community, such that we can allow for many truths, even contradictory truths that come from having two Americas, the few who have wealth and power, and the many made helpless for want of either, if not both. We are asking, O Great Spirit, for nothing less than the workings of a sacred blacksmith, where the fires of passion and reason render our hearts and minds malleable enough to forge a new and invigorated covenant of activists, such that the plentiful resources of your precious creation are made available to all who have need. We pray, O God, for nothing less than the wisdom of Solomon, the perseverance of Job, that we might become as compassionate as the great Buddha and live our lives as the living Jesus lived his. Bless then, O God, this gathering and the bounty you have set before us, with the faith, courage, the fortitude, and the endurance to fulfill the simple request you make of all persons everywhere, that we do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly at your side. We ask these things in the names of all those, known and unknown, remembered and forgotten, who lived and died as true servants of humankind. Amen.
I know y'all are eager to hear our main speaker, so let me just tell you, is everybody opening their packages? Because let's do it. Now. On behalf of the Center for Progressive Studies and the Unitarian Universalist Church. So welcome, please. I can tell you that we have a lot in common, and most of us have knowledge that we want to share, and that's one thing that binds us together, I think, today. I also would like to hope that this will inspire you, will move you, will get you going into action. And I know that a lot of us are already doing that, and I think if we weren't, we wouldn't be in this room in some way, some manner. So what we want you to do is form alliances. So we want you to exchange information among each other. That's one of the things that we hope that will encourage, that you brought cards, or that you'll get a piece of paper, and that you'll start talking to one another and forming these alliances. But this could not have been done without at least some important people. And I don't know, they're probably working in the hallway. And I think you've already heard from Susan Peoples who they were, but they need to be repeated. And these It was just a small group of people. I want to say it was like 7 people that put this together, believe it or not. So I have to say, one of my favorite quotes is from Margaret Mead. Never doubt what a small group of, thoughtful, committed citizens can do to change the world, for indeed it is the only thing that ever has. So thank you. And I also would like to thank the Police Officers Association. They made a generous donation, as well as the Deputies Association, to cover some of the cost here. But at this time, I'd like to please thank Ann Smith.
All right, Ann.
Michael Smith.
Yeah, Michael.
Dr. Lorraine Steen, Sherry Del Karen Sykes, who is actually at Metro Ministries feeding the hungry. So talk about social action.
Yeah.
And he's going to be here later on. Also, we have Gail Blanquier.
Yeah.
Lori Bush, who is the person that brought both speakers today.
Yeah.
Joy and Abel Cavada, Precious Abel and Joy Cavada, for getting us started at the Center for Progressive Studies. And we have Ronald Hamilton, who, where is he? I'm telling you, he got started and we can't sit him down, so that's good. At this time, in order for us to continue to do our work, this is all no budget, little budget. So we need you to start helping us grow. And so we're asking, you're going to be the seeds. You're going to help the Center for Progressive Studies grow. And in turn, it's going to help our community grow. So there's going to be a few envelopes scattered around here. And if you can, please help us grow by donating whatever you can. And if you can't donate now, take the envelope with you, and maybe you can just mail it into the center. At this time, then, I'd like to introduce our next. Well, I'd like to introduce Lori Bush, who will then introduce our main speaker, Ms. Lori Bush.
Diane Wilson's personal sacrifices to bring attention to the greed and stupidity of corporate domination of our resources and environment will be legend and legion if she keeps on as she undoubtedly will. Let us remake our world by all of us nobodies putting forth a fraction of what this self-proclaimed nobody particular has. When Diane told me the theme of her message, I was reminded of my favorite quote from Laurel Thatcher Ulrich. Well-behaved women rarely make history. Allow me to introduce one for the His and Her Story books, Diane Wilson.
Yeah.
Hello there. I'm sure glad to be accepted in a nice little coastal town. I usually don't get this kind of reception and being invited, but I want you to know I've been a fisherwoman my whole life. I've been a shrimper, and not too long ago I was doing a hunger strike. Well, I did a lot of hunger strikes, but when I was doing a hunger strike at DuPont headquarters in Delaware, and there was a big sign that says "Shrimper on hunger strike," and the news came down, and it was headlines: "Shrimper doing a hunger strike." And one day I was sitting out there, and here come these guys, and they said, "Where's the stripper?" And I said, "The stripper?" And they said, "Yeah, the stripper on the hunger strike." And I said, "No, it's a shrubber on the hunger strike." So, anyhow, misunderstood. The little brochure there, it's not a stripper up here, it's a shrubber up here. And but anyway, I know my talk is on the art of misbehaving, and y'all might think I have been like this all my life. I know I have been so rambunctious that some people believe it's just a quality I've had my entire life, and you know, and that's why that they can't be rambunctious. It's because they were just not that way. You know, I remember I was at I don't know, Delaware or Virginia, someplace up there, and this girl came up to me and she told me, she said, I know you can be real unreasonable, but she says, I'm just afraid. And I would like, first of all, for you folks to know that I was so quiet when I was a kid. I used to, anybody would come over to the house and I'd climb under the bed and refuse to come out of the bed. I was refused to talk. I probably didn't talk till I was at least 4 years old. And through the entire junior high and high school, I never said one single word. And so if anybody ever knew me in high school, they'd say, Diane, who? Because I was totally invisible. And when I first started my my work on being an environmental activist, I was a shrimper. I'd been a shrimper my whole life. I'd been a shrimp captain since I was 27 years old. I was then 40 years old. So, you know, for all you folks also who say not only that you're not an unreasonable type person and that you're too old, I want you to know when you hit 40, you just start getting your wind. And yes, please, you're just coming into your own. But at that point, I had been a shrimper my whole life. I had 5 kids, all under the age of 10, and I had one of the shrimpers that worked for me. The shrimping was so bad that I was running a fish house down at the bay. And generally, there's not many women shrimpers out there on the bay. I don't know if y'all know. Is there any shrimpers out here? I mean, they're usually not real progressive. No, sir, they're not very progressive. But anyway, the only reason why I've been a shrimper all my life is because I was 4th generation. So it was pretty well accepted that I'd been on there my whole life, and you know, they didn't see anything totally unusual about it. So, but shrimping had been so bad that I was running a fish house, and we had been having all of these tides, you know, and I'm sure y'all know exactly what I'm talking about, because I know y'all had the red tide many times, but we were having the green tide, we were having the brown tide, we were having the red tide, and then we had in our area, we had one of the largest dolphin die-offs in the Mammal Stranding Network's history. Wow. And I was running running a fish house. I was running my brother's fish house, and I had one of the shrimpers come up to me, and he handed me an article, and it was the first time the toxic release inventory ever came out. And I know right now the Bush administration has been trying really hard to pretty much eliminate a lot of the benefits in the science that comes from the toxic release inventory. But I'm telling you, it was that information about what industries were putting out that that gave me my first link on what was actually going on, because my little county, at that time it was like 15,000 people in the entire county, and we were not known for absolutely nothing. I think the only thing Cedar was known for is we had Bonnie and Clyde go through there a number of times, and I even had my uncle used to take Bonnie and Clyde up the river, and but we were known for absolutely nothing, and we were #1, our county, Calhoun County. You know, I bet y'all don't even know where Calhoun County is. That's how tiny it is. But the only thing is, it's by Lavaca Bay. Yeah, Port Lavaca. But anyway, we were #1 county in the nation for toxic disposal to the land. Wow. And
all right, congratulations.
And you know, and like I said, I'm not a talker. I avoided people. I'm socially inept, and no, I'm not a liar here, but I really was. But the thing is, I had spent my whole life on a bay. I'd been on the bay since I was 8 years old, and to find out you're like #1 in the nation, it absolutely blew my mind. So I did probably the thing that everybody in this room would do if they got that type of information, you know. And all I did was I just went down and asked for a meeting at City Hall. You know, it was the first time I'd ever did that in my entire life. And within a week of asking for a hearing, I had the mayor's office, I had city council, I had the county commissioner, the senator sent his aide, economic development came down there to the fish house. I had the bank president come down to the fish house. You know, and I imagine not a single one of those fellows had ever been down there in their entire life. But suddenly, there they were down there at the bay, and what they wanted me to do was just cool it, Diane, just cool it. You know, is that they kept saying, let it cool off, let it cool off. And I'm like, let what cool off? You know, because I can't even begin to tell you how ignorant I was about environmental regulations. I had no idea that there was a district office in Corpus Christi. I didn't even know what the name of the agency was in Texas. I didn't know where the EPA was at. I knew absolutely zero. And so I was pretty stupid. And you know, and here they were trying to, you know, these much better presenters, much more welcomed in the community, were telling me to just drop it and let it cool down and let it be a good citizen, Diane. Just be a good citizen. And you know, and to be real frank, I think it was because it was so bizarre on the backlash, is that really, you know, the curiosity is really kind of what kept me going. I was like, what in the sandhill is going on? And, you know, and eventually I found out exactly what was going on, and it was that Texas was having the biggest chemical expansion they had ever had, you know, and it was the biggest in the United States in 10 years. And what it was Formosa Plastics, who had been kicked out of Taiwan, you know, and you know, and this was when the Kuomintang was there, you know, and you know, if you had more than 13 people in a group, you would be arrested over there. And this was, you know, then there was no regulation on EPA. They could do what they want, but they kicked Formosa out. And what did they do? They come straight to Texas and Louisiana, and it was like, which state is going to give them the most? And you know, and so Texas ended up getting Formosa Plastics because we gave them $250 million in tax abatements in our little school district that was fixed to eliminate 17 teachers. They gave them $100 million. And so you might well know that I was not real popular. I really was. And not only that, but the senator, oh, he's not here, Senator Armbruster. He had a security contract with the company. The mayor had a construction contract. The justice of the peace had contracts. Everybody had contracts. This was an economic bonanza, and they couldn't figure out what that crazy woman was doing. And matter of fact, you know, I know a little bit later you're going to be talking about class issues and race, and it was like, well, in this environmental issue, it wasn't just an environmental issue. It was a gender issue. It was this thing about a fishing woman, you know, high school education. It's like, what does she know? And one, they didn't believe it was actually me. It was like, okay, no. It can't really be her. It's like, what guy is really behind her? Really, they really do. It's like, who's really behind you? And they even said they suspected that I was hired by the state of Louisiana to derail it in Texas. So I was a spy. It was just money. That's the whole deal. And so eventually I was totally without anybody. Anybody that tried to join, their husband would call and say, you know, we're trying to get a loan at the bank, and Formosa Plastics was one of the board members. They couldn't get a job, you know, because Formosa was trying to hire that company as a contractor. So eventually, I couldn't even keep members. And then Formosa tried to sue me, so I didn't have a single board member. I was totally illegal. It was kind of like me. I was about the only one. And I remember this was the time I was working with Jim Blackburn, the environmental lawyer, and because I couldn't keep a board member. And I said, because Formosa was trying to sue us. They said they were going to sue us because we were saying they were polluters and all this type of stuff. It's kind of like a slap suit. And so he said, well, don't you have women that don't have anything? And I'm like, well, yeah, but then they got their husbands, because their husband was like, you can't go with that stupid woman. She's crazy. And so eventually what I got was divorced single women that were real poor. And that was all I could keep up. And I ain't lying. I really did. They had to be divorced but didn't stay with me. And so eventually I learned, because up to that point I'd been playing inside the box. I had been filing the petitions. I had been talking to the senators and the Congress people. And I might mention that the head of the EPA at the time had been Phil Graham's campaign manager, and he was the one that was getting the lion's share of the credit for bringing Formosa down. And he was fixing to run for president, and he was getting his war chest, and they had promised Formosa, permits in no time at all, and and we're going to give you all this money, and you're not going to have to. We're going to do your, give you all this dredging of the ship channel, the Mercury Channel out there. And so it was, like I said, it was the fact that Phil Graham's campaign manager was the head of the EPA, and he was pretty much okaying the whole deal. And so I was the only one. I was pretty much the only group that was out there doing anything, even, because I was doing all these permit hearings. But the permit hearings were going nowhere. The lawsuits were going nowhere. The petitions were going nowhere. And eventually, I remember I had Rick Abraham at that time he was Texans United out of Houston, and the EPA had just leaked all this information that Formosa Plastics was not going to have to do an environmental impact study. And an environmental impact study is, if there's a federal project involved, you're supposed to be doing an environmental impact study. And Formosa had like 5 federal projects, and it had to do with also a mercury contaminated site, but it didn't matter. The law flat did not matter. Now you go out on that street and you try to go 40 in a 30-mile zone, and you see how fast you get thrown in jail. Because I get thrown in jail plenty and saw a bunch of girls for pretty much the same thing. But you can have corporations, you can have state and federal agencies violating federal and state law all over the place, and it's just. And so eventually, it was at that point when Rick Abraham, I remember he came up to me, and I'm sure a lot of people had probably come up to the very same spot, and they say, well, it's over. It's, it's already over with. All you're going to be doing is walking at the end of the parade, and it's done. It was a done deal anyway. We all know it's a done deal anyway. So you fought a good fight, pat yourself on the shoulder, and just know it's over with. You got to know when to give up. And I was like, that was my home. Our family had been there 100 years. I saw that bay every day of my life, and I couldn't do it. I said, they're not going to get that bay. They're not going to do it. And he said, well, there's nothing you can do anymore. And off the top of my head, I didn't have a single thought about it. It just come right off the top of my head. And I said, I'm going to do a hunger strike. And I remember Rick Abraham, he just laughed his head off. He said that's the funniest thing he ever heard of. He said, people in Texas don't do hunger strikes. He said, we got our rules on the things that we do, but hunger strikes just isn't it. And especially a woman doing a hunger strike. And then he said, you can't do a hunger strike. And I said, yeah, I can. And he's like, no, he says, we just doing a hunger strike. I said, I don't care, I'm doing a hunger strike. And the thing of it is, and this is real important, is that when you get a really crazy, far-out idea like that, is you need to move on it. Because I knew enough about myself that if I went home and slept over the fact that, should I do a hunger strike or not? You were going to wake up in the morning and say, thank God I didn't do that hunger strike. I was just going to do it. And I knew I would. I knew I would. So I found the closest phone and I called up a reporter and I said, I want to do a hunger strike to make Formosa do an environmental impact study. And she said, well, when are you going to do it? And I said, I'm going to do it right now. And I did. I started right then, and I was so stupid about it. I mean, I knew nothing about hunger strikes. I knew nothing. I just knew you didn't eat food. That's the only thing I knew. And so I did my first hunger strike on a shrimp boat in Lavaca Bay. And like I said, I was so stupid. I didn't have a phone. You know, this was before cell phones, before I knew anything about cell phones. So I was out there and nobody knew I was on the hunger strike except Formosa. Formosa knew it. And I would, every morning, I would have Formosa's management in their little black suit and ties. And each time there was a few different fellas, and they would walk on the boat and get on the docks and they'd say, Diane, do you know how stupid you look? They said, you look really stupid. It's like you really shot yourself in the foot on that one. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. I'm doing a hunger strike. And eventually it took about a week before I got any kind of media attention. And I remember Linda Hetzel with the Victoria Advocate. I remember she finally came down about the 7th or 8th day and she said, Formosa, I mean, the Union, Victoria Advocate had told her, well, you got to write something good about Formosa. Go down there and write something good about Formosa. So she had to come down and talk to me, and she said, and they told me, I can't quote you. They want anybody to have you on a quote saying anything. So she says, tell me a man I can go quote. And that was pretty much it. But the interesting thing is like, I mean, when you can finally reach the people like that, it was like the end of the straw for them. And so I did. That's where I got zero discharge from Formosa, and it took 5 years. It took me 5 years to get zero discharge from Formosa. But you know, the interesting thing is that the next month I went over to Alcoa Aluminum, and I went into the plant manager's office, and I said, well, now, do we do zero discharge or do we do this other stuff? And in about 15 minutes, he agreed to zero discharge. And they put over $5 million into changing up the waste. So just know, you know, sometimes you got to be unreasonable for a very long time, but then after that, it just, you know, people seem to get the drift, and they know you're very unpredictable and liable to do what you think they're, you know, what they think they're going to do. And so, anyway, I was going to leave. My time might already be up. Where's the phone? Is it? I was going to leave it open. Anybody have any questions out there? Yes, ma'am.
What are you working on now?
Exposure. It's constant. It's constant. Those workers get exposed constantly. I know when you first start working against a chemical company, one of the first things they do is they start telling the workers that you're there to shut down the plant, that you're trying to run them out. And there was a lot of animosity in the beginning. I remember one of the biggest demonstrations that was against me was the company hired 300 workers at Formosa to picket me. And now, you know, because you're out there so long, you're finally, they know what kind of person you are after. It takes a long time though. And now they trust me, and so, because they don't trust OSHA, they don't trust going to the EPA or the state agencies, they definitely don't trust their company there. So they start bringing you information. And so I've got a worker at the Union Carbide Dow, and I'm talking to some workers at Formosa, and also trying to do the stop the coal power plants there. We got two of them, yeah. Two of them coming in, and also we've got, because I've been in jail so many times, we've now got a Texas jail project. I've been in jail 19 times, and so, yeah, so that's a real big issue in Texas, the Texas jail criminal system. And that's it, yes, yes sir.
Does the company test the employees?
What was that again?
Does the company test the employees?
Well, they're supposed to. When they're exposed, they're supposed to have them, supposed to have a monitoring on them, and if they're violating standards, they're supposed to be notified that they're being violated, they're being exposed to vinyl chloride. But I'll just tell you, for instance, is like the standard for vinyl chloride, which can give you cancer of the liver. It's like 1 parts per million for like an 8 hour. And the worker that I was talking to, he brought me internal documents. And I mean, it ranged anywhere from 2 to 15 to 100 to 500 to 3,000 to 6,000 parts per million. Vinyl chloride, constant, every single day, every year. This is what the workers are getting, and I'm telling you, you don't hear about it. Yes, sir.
Are you aware that in the last 15 to 20 years, there was a study done by the British in which they said one of the most polluted harbors in the entire world was the harbor of Texas because of the Sarco plant from 50 to 60 years ago dumping toxic metals into our water. And that's why we see these little signs posed that do not fish in Corpus Christi Bay. And it's because of the toxic heavy metals that are in our water.
That's right. Very good. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Do your children work with you on any of these projects?
When I was first starting and the children were little and I didn't have babysitters and I couldn't afford a babysitter, all of my kids were with me to my demonstrations and sometimes they were terrific little demonstrators and sometimes they were just, sometimes they just want it normal. And I remember one time I was having, I had one of the girls, she had just turned in her teens and she was a holy terror. And I was having a real hard time with her and she was like saying, well, I'm going to get a job at for medicine. but by and large, they've been real good. They even went on a few hunger strikes with me. But they're normal kids, trust me. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if Susie Canales is still here. But
She left.
She did leave. This is perfect for her. She's pretty much the same similar story. I don't know if you've met with her.
No, I've heard of her. I've heard of her.
Citizens for Environmental
Yeah.
Justice here, and we're working against, community members against the oil refinery. It's a similar story. You
Yeah.
try to go to proper channels at first until you realize after years
That's right.
that you can't do it that way.
That's right. They hope you'll go through the regular channels.
You don't wrap it up.
Yeah.
Don't tie up. One of the problems that we encounter here locally is we have to conceptualize what the behavior of corporations as criminal behavior.
Mm-hmm.
As on par with homicide, with rape, and other,
Yeah.
if not worse, because it's silent mass murder.
Yeah, that's very true.
And the way to do that is to go through the mass media. The problem is when the media is bought out by corporations,
Yeah.
they will not show that side of the story. So did you have the media?
I had locally, like in the Victoria Jackson, Calhoun County, I had absolutely zero. And I remember, like even the Port Lavaca Wave, it was like the publisher was the, he was, I think he was the vice president of Chamber of Commerce. And I hate to say this, but Chamber of Commerce was my worst enemy. They could not stand me. They said, all you're going to do is make the snowbirds run off. So they said, we don't want those snowbirds to look out there and see EPA and moon suits out there. So shut up.
Thank you.
I love the beat.
Thanks for inviting me, thanks for bringing me over, thanks for allowing me to hear fellow Zapatista and Diane Wilson. So what I'm going to talk about today is being a Zapatista where we live. the story Diane just told is pretty much the same story I'm going to tell you, from the other side of the border. So let's think about that. Let's think about people moving on both sides of the border against governments which are not democratic governments, trying to make those governments democratic. So I think what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about these people I've been working with, this amazing trip that I've had for the last 13 years, and then trying to draw some lessons for and talk about how we can do what they do, what the Zapatista Army of National Liberation has been doing for 13 years, how we need to do it every place that we live. And that, that's not just out there in the bay, but on the land too, in our own homes, everywhere that we need to have that same kind of spirit. I really want to thank Diane for that inspiring talk. This is how it began. The pitch black night suddenly came alive with darting shadows. The slap of rubber boots against the slick pavement echoed throughout the hushed neighborhoods on the periphery of town. Sleepy chuchos stirred in their patios, stretched and bayed, the howling catching from block to block, barrio to barrio. Across the narrow Puente Blanco, down the wretched Centenario Diagonal, up General Utria for the Marketplace District, dark columns jogged in military cadence, with their features canceled behind ski masks and bandanas that left their collective breath hanging in the still mountain air like vapors from a past many Mexicans do not want to recognize as being very present. The sin rostros, those without faces, advanced on the center of the city of San Cristobal de las Casas, the apex of the Mayan highlands, in the southernmost state of Chiapas, Mexico's most impoverished, arguably its most indigenous state. January 1st, 1994, in the very first hour of the North American Free Trade Agreement. So it began, the Zapatista Rebellion in Chiapas. Tell you a little bit about the rebellion and the contours of the rebellion down the years. I've been covering this trip, this journey, and now for 13 years, but actually I was writing stories about it the year before the rebellion exploded, that momentous moment on the 1st of January 1994. And indeed, the Zapatista Rebellion was brewing for a long time. And both the United States government and the Mexican government knew it full well. Indeed, in 1993, NAFTA was up before Congress. There were skirmishes in the jungles of Chiapas. The Mexican military knew all about it and put reports on the President Carlos Salinas' desk, and Salinas said, hey, I don't want to know about this. The CIA was inspecting the area, satellite flyovers. The DEA was on the border, and the NSA, any of the alphabetical agencies could have told you that this was about to happen. Bill Clinton, he didn't want to hear anything about that. Don't bring that to me. He sent Brian Jenkins, a terrorism expert from the Rand Corporation, up to the Hill to tell Congress that if they didn't pass NAFTA, there would be a rebellion in Mexico. Absolutely the opposite. And so when it came, on that January 1st, a lot of people swiveled around and looked at the globe and said, hey, where is this place Chiapas, And, people began to understand that Mexico was not really happy with the North American Free Trade Agreement. That the Mexican people had never been asked about NAFTA. That the American people, the North American people, had never been asked about NAFTA, and it had been imposed upon them on both sides of the border. And that's where it began. In Mexico, with the Zapatistas, the problem basically was corn. Enormous amounts of corn that were about to be dumped in Mexico that had totaled 36 million tons in the last 6 years, most of it genetically modified coming into the country, displacing Mexican corn farmers. Moving them off their fields, over 1 million corn farmers. You take that, multiply it by 5, and talk about the families. We're talking about 6 million people pushed off the land since NAFTA came in January 1st, 1994. Zapatista knew about it first. Why? If you look at the sacred books of the Mayan people, the Popol Vuh, the Chilambalam, the Mayans are the people of the corn. And it's not just that they are the people of the corn that grow corn, that eat corn. They are actually made from corn.
Wow.
So, we're talking about something that went right to the quick of the matter, right to the heart of their traditions and their people. And that's why the rebellion began, January 1st, 1994. 13 years later, we're still at it. Well, there's been a lot of ups and downs, dangerous curves and tragedies, horrible tragedies. 49 people massacred by paramilitaries trained and financed by the Mexican Army, which in turn was trained and financed by the U.S. Army back at Christmas time in 1977. And actually it's a comedy too. I mean, this has been a rebellion with a sense of humor down the years. And in fact, I was telling Lori last night that there came a time at a meeting in the jungle a couple of years ago when that very quixotic spokesperson for the Zapatista Army of National Liberation that we know as Subcomandante Marcos told some jokes at a gathering when people were working real hard in the hot sun, talking about globalization and how we deal with that. And people came to him and said, "You're making fun of us." And he said, "No, if the business which we are about is so serious that if we can't laugh at ourselves, we're going to go nuts." So I think this has been a rebellion with a sense of humor. In a nutshell, if I were going to tell you the story of these 13 years, I could stand here all day and do this, but I'm going to just boil it right down. If this was a children's story, this would be a story about how the people of the corn demanded of their government to improve their lives, to improve the way they lived, to improve their schools, to improve their educational system, to improve their housing, to improve their agrarian policies, to improve a lot of things to make it better. Until they finally came to understand that the government couldn't do those things, or wouldn't do those things for them. And then they decided, well, I guess we got to do it for ourselves. And I think it's probably one of the first lessons that we can learn right here, is that, the government does not respond to what we want them to respond to. And certainly, the Zapatistas' key demand, autonomy, to be able to be the subject of their own destiny, to control their own lives, was something that the government could never grant them. Government said, well, the government signed an agreement with them back in 1996, the Indian Rights Law, said, well, we're going to grant you autonomy over your own agrarian policies, your own environmental policy, exploitation of natural resources, your own educational system, bilingual educational system, your own justice system, your own health system, your own communication system, the way you elect your officials, not just for the Zapatistas, but for all 57 indigenous peoples in Mexico. There are 57 distinct indigenous nations. And the president vetoed it. He said, "No, we can't do this. These people are going to secede from Mexico. They're going to form their own nation." And indigenous people sit on a lot of, they sit on a lot of important resources, a lot of oil lands, a lot of mineral rights, and a lot of forests, a whole lot of forests. So indeed, the government could never do it. And the Zapatistas finally said, at this momentous meeting in 2003, January 1st, 2003, 20,000 representatives of the communities gathered in San Cristobal de las Casas said, "You know what? We don't need the government's permission to be autonomous. We are autonomous. We are just autonomous." Another lesson that I think that we need to learn. Now, autonomy is really a fiction. If you can't provide for the people in your own communities what the government would provide. You have to have the infrastructure. My new book over here is called Making Another World Possible. Zapatistas Making Another World Possible, Chronicles of Resistance, 2000-2006. That making another world possible is key. You know, for years we've been marching around at anti-globalization demonstrations in front of the World Bank, in front of the G8, wherever the masters of the universe seem to get together, saying, you know, another world is possible. Well, we have to make that other world. And the Zapatistas are making that other world with their wheelbarrows and their calloused hands and their backs, with their paintbrushes, with their minds, you know, with their collective action together. You know. And they are building that other world that provides now in the zone a school in every community, a grade school in every community, a middle school in the larger communities. People are now in the process of putting in a high school system. You're even talking about the university system, you know, Zapatista University. You know. You know, autonomy is a fiction if you can't provide for the people in terms of their health care. Clinics in every community, you know. People are health brigades that go out and work on preventative medicine in the jungle. Sometimes it takes you days to get from one village to another walking through the mud. But they got to do it because they are getting off the government grid. In this process of creating their autonomy, of taking charge of their own lives, you know. And it's been a long, strange trip, but one that has been entirely inspiring to watch this happen. To watch the schools go up, and then the paintbrushes go to work, and suddenly there is this incredible mural of an ear of corn on the face of Emiliano Zapata, the face of the great anarchist leader Flores Magón, the eyes of the people on the wall. You know? Murals, 400 murals on 400 structures throughout the entire Zapatista zone. It's like a living art gallery.
Wow.
It is quite amazing, you know. And you know that it's not just the health collectives, it's not just the education collectives that are building this other world. There are commissions for virtually everything. I was just at a meeting of the Medicinal Plants Commission up at Oventique in the highlands of Chiapas. You know, there's been a whole concentration of scientists trying to actually, how can we say it? No other word for it, steal the vegetation of the Lacandon jungle. We call it biopiracy. You know, Zapatistas are taking charge of that. So you can't come into our communities and collect this plant matter and try and isolate something from it and sell it to a pharmaceutical firm or an industrial firm for millions and millions of dollars and taking away our traditions. That's called biopiracy. So there's a medicinal plant collected or a bicycle repair collector. Zapatistas say, look, bicycles, hey, we hadn't thought about that before. Now they're making their own bicycles, you know, capitalizing bikes and putting them together down in the Cañada. It's relatively flat. People moving from place to place on bicycles. But virtually in every aspect of their lives, they've come together, collectivized, and figured out how to deal with the problems that directly affect them. How do you support a system like this? How do you build these clinics? How do you build these schools? One of the most important, I think, building blocks of this autonomy has been organic coffee. So it's just kind of a plug for Zapatista coffee. But the Zapatistas are selling now 20 containers to Europe, about 10 containers to the US. It's kind of outstripping demand at this point. But if you have a co-op here or whatever you seem to look at as your alternative food outlet, you might suggest that they order some Zapatista coffee from the Human Bean Company in Denver. That money goes right back into the autonomies in order to continue to build the schools and the clinics and the weaving collectives and all of the elements that compose the autonomy of the Zapatista people of national liberation. You know. The Zapatistas are getting off the grid, as I said. Probably to me one of the greatest, or the sharpest and clearest example of how this is going on is in a town that has become one of the centers right up close to the Lacandon jungle, a place with a very haunting name of La Realidad. the reality. You know? A couple of years ago, an Italian solidarity group brought in some turbines. And they hooked up the turbines. The river kind of moves pretty fast there, hooked up the turbines. Mexican Electricity Workers Union came in and hooked up the turbines to each house. So the town got some electricity. You know, I remember all of a sudden the radio started, you know, blaring out the news. You could find it out right away because everyone was plugged in. The Mexican government's electricity grid doesn't work very well in southeastern Chiapas. The Federal Electricity Commission is often blacked out, often goes down. And today, when it goes down, the only light in the jungle, that one point of light in the jungle, is La Realidad because they're off the grid. You know? In a real sense, it's a metaphor for what we need to do and what the Zapatistas have been doing over the years. The Zapatista communities encompass about 125,000 people from 4 Mayan subgroups: the Tzotzil, the people in the highlands, the Tzeptal people, the Toholabal people, and the Chol people. These are all languages. These are not dialects or idioms. These are developed language systems, and these cultures are traditional and go back millenniums. Those 125,000 people all throughout eastern Chiapas are organized into 1,300 communities. There are 1,300 communities in which they are. And those 1,300 communities are grouped together in 29 autonomous municipalities. A municipality is roughly equivalent to a county here. So 29 autonomous municipalities, and those 29 autonomous municipalities grouped together in 5 centers that are called caracoles, or spirals. Another definition is the conch shell, which is used in Mesoamerica to call a community to be, caracoles. And each of these public centers, these regional centers, is administered by a junta de buen gobierno, a good government commission, which draws representatives from each of the autonomous municipalities, but there is purview, 6, 7, 8 autonomous municipalities send their representatives to these centers, and they sit to administer this regional autonomy. It's an interesting process. It's an interesting process because there's a constant revolving door in which people, the people on the Junta de Buen Gobierno, the government commissions, sit for a month or 2 months. They go back to their communities, and someone from their communities replaces them. And what the Zapatistas, it's kind of frustrating because you present a project to the juntas, and you come back in a month or 2 months, and it's different people. And but the idea is indeed, and something that we need to remember is, teaching everybody to govern everybody else. That's basically what's happening with that thing now. So it is a new system of doing things in many respects. What are the characteristics of how these things get done? Well, I think the first principle of the way Zapatistas govern each other is this principle of mandar obedeciendo, which simply means governing by obeying the will of the people. And we could translate that out to say, serve the community, essentially. People that govern within the Zapatista framework don't want political power. The Zapatistas don't want political power. They don't want to overthrow the state and take over the state. They want to control their own destiny. So the way you do that is by serving your community. Mandar obedeciendo. The Zapatista decision-making process basically built on collective decision-making. The basic decision-making body is the community assembly making that decision. Decisions are made collectively. They are made on consensus. Meetings can last for 13, 14, 15 hours until people reach consensus, but that is the goal of what they're doing. Decision-making is increasingly, and it's still ways to go, done at gender parity, so that men and women have equal voice in the communities and equal vote in the communities. This has been a difficult struggle, and perhaps the most difficult struggle of the Zapatistas to reach gender parity. It's done rejecting the patriarchy of the way things were done in the past when one big man told everybody else what to do. It's guided by principles that say we are against the exploitation of man by man, or woman by man, or woman by woman. We are against the exploitation. We are against this system of savage capitalism, which is indeed savaging communities of all of Latin America. And it is grounded in solidarity, grounded in the concept that it's not only our struggle, that together we have to be in this struggle. Grounded in the words of that great Salvadoran revolutionary poet, Roque Dalton, who said, I'll say it in Spanish and I'll say it in English, "Y mis venas no terminan en mí, sino en la sangre unánime de todos que luchan por el amor, por la vida, por la tierra, por las cosas. And my veins do not end in me, but in the unanimous blood of all people who struggle for love, for life, for the land, for things." Roque Dalton, Google them up, you'll find a whole lot more poetry there. In the first months after the Zapatista rebellion exploded in Chiapas, we had an extended opportunity to talk with this gentleman who calls himself Superintendent Marcos. This is really a mask, but he takes off the mask to be someone else. And they had come up to San Cristobal de las Casas to negotiate with the government in the cathedral in that city, and every morning we were able to come in and talk to them. This was way back in 1994. And I think every morning we would sit there and we'd say, well, tell us, what can we do? What's the best kind of solidarity that we can do? You know? And I think more in exasperation, just to get rid of us, Marcos one day said, well, just be a Zapatista where you are. You know? That was the best solidarity. I think we didn't hear that message for a long time. I think for a long time, we did things like send our old clothes to Chiapas to help the poor Indians. No? And indeed, Marcos once produced one pink pump, size 6, that had arrived with all the old clothes. You know? Called it the Cinderella syndrome. You know? That doesn't help us, he said. You know, these people come in, they want to build an herb garden in our community, and the school is falling down. You know? We need to take a look at, you know, what we need. And I think we invited speakers up from Chiapas to tell us about how terrible things were and how the Indians were victims of their government, when indeed they were taking this initiative. You know, terrible things happen, but the Zapatistas have never been victims. You know? They've always, you know, moved forward on that. Or we would go to Chiapas to the meetings and the encuentros and draw energy from them and come back with our little films, and we'd show them, we'd raise more money, we send money on down. Which is still very valuable work. It's kind of, you know, solidarity work. But we really didn't get this idea of what it meant to be a Zapatista where we are. You know? To make these decisions together, you know, without a hierarchy in place, you know, to speak truth to power together, you know, where we live. I think there's been a change. You know, I've been noting that in my trips around the U.S. in the last little bit. Some of it, I think, comes from the Zapatistas' plan that they call the Other Campaign. It began this year kind of to contrast with the political campaign. Zapatistas don't much believe in the political parties, the political class. They think we need to organize down below. They think we need to go to the people down below and listen to them and hear how they're resisting what is coming down in their communities. And some of the other campaigns from Comandante Marcos traveled all around Mexico listening to the people down at the bottom, dealing with issues, a lot of issues about place. Because this thing, this savage capitalism that they call neoliberalism, has imposed a lot of stuff on Mexico that impacts the places where people live. 700 Walmarts in Mexico these days, no? Taking away community land. No? Tourist infrastructure coming into Mexico, taking away community land. GMO corn devastating 300 species of, you know, the purest corn. Where the corn comes from, it comes from Mexico. Over and over again, issues of place. Putting all those little resistances together in one tapestry of resistance. And I see that happening here. I saw that happening last summer at South Central Farms in LA. Anybody ever hear of the struggle with South Central Farms? These were 4 city blocks that were planted by immigrant workers, growing foods from the countries that they came from, growing their cilantro, growing their episote, and growing Zapatista corn, good, uncontaminated, natural Zapatista corn. A lot of things to feed hundreds of immigrant families. Well, guess who wanted those lots? A man that wanted to develop a warehouse for none other than Mr. Walmart. This struggle developed, a struggle of place. It went on for many months. The sheriff's deputies came out. People were chained to the trees. We had movie stars up in the trees. It was, you know, it was a good old time, really. Had to get up there early. You know. In the end, they did push us off the land, but you know, it was an autonomous space controlled by the people that grew the food there, made their decisions without hierarchies, came together in consensus, did what they had to do to defend that place. They're not a farm now, but it's not where South Central was. But we learned a lot from that struggle. We learned, you know, that we need to be Zapatistas where we are. And I've been traveling around the country talking to this issue. I find groups that used to send their old clothes down to Chiapas, you're working on issues of homelessness, working on issues of racism, working on issues of juvenile justice, working on issues of prisons and the justice systems themselves all over the West Coast. And I just came in from New Mexico, had meetings in Albuquerque and Taos and down in Las Cruces with community activists, putting them in the same room, in the same place, talking about how these decisions are being made by the Zapatistas, urging people to be Zapatistas where they are, which means really talk to each other, you know? It's important that all you people, when I'm done, talk to each other, you know? Because all of you are, you know, part of this change that has to occur. But it's been quite gratifying to find people, you know, taking this to heart. In Taos, people are walking around with little, you know, armbands that say, I'm a Zapatista. They're also walking around with paper towels in the event that they run into Donald Rumsfeld, who lives up there in Taos, whether you know it or not, you know. They're offering Donald Rumsfeld with paper towels to wash the blood off his hand. And that's where being a Zapatista where you are, you know. Now, being a Zapatista where you are, there's a lot of risks to it. Let me tell you just one story before I get out of here about how these risks sometimes play out in odd ways. Way back in February of 2003, we got the great idea of going on up to Baghdad and placing ourselves between Bush's bombs and the Iraqi people. We were the human shields in Baghdad. And we got in some buses and we went up there and hundreds of people came in. We had, you know, people from 32 countries, from Norway to South Africa, Argentina to Japan, Buddhist monks, you know, pounding on drums. It's a great old time, really, you know. We had one problem, though, you know. We wanted to go and place ourselves at the at schools and hospitals and the rooms. Iraq is the cradle of civilization, you know. I dreamt about, you know, the walls of Babylon coming on top of it. Well, this government that kind of stood between us and Iraqi people run by a guy named Saddam Hussein, they didn't like that. They didn't like this idea of autonomy, right? That we should be autonomous. We rode up, we had some buses, we rode up to Baghdad. We had a big picture of Emiliano Zapata right up there. That was the first sign we were going to be in trouble, you know? So, you know, the Saddam government said, well, no, you can't do that. We're going to send you to these state infrastructure sites because, you know, of course, they want to take the credit and manipulate us, move us in the direction of defending the Saddam government and not defending the people of Iraq. We did it partially. I mean, we stood at the state infrastructure sites in the hopes that we would get these other places, but we didn't get them. And, but that didn't satisfy them. The Saddam government did not like this question of autonomy. They didn't much like spontaneity. You know, that was the thing that was really bad. Sometimes we marched through the streets of Baghdad, you know, shouting against the invasion that was coming. And although it was in defense of the Iraqi people, it wasn't in defense of the Saddam government. We didn't have any police permits, you know, so they didn't like that, you know. This whole question of taking control of our, of our lives while we were there, where we were going to die, where we were going to be bombed, became a major issue. We kept saying, well, we're just applying these Zapatista principles of, being autonomous here. And some of us got deported on the eve of the bombings. 3 of us had to get in a car and leave 3 days before the bombings began, but we left hundreds of people behind. And they stood at 5 sites in Baghdad, a couple of water treatment plants, a couple of electricity generating plants, a food storage warehouse, and a refinery. We were at the refinery trying to talk to the workers about how bad oil is. I don't think it was the time to do that. That might have gotten us in a little kerfuffle with the government there. And they took us out, they put us in cars and took us out. And actually, the night that we went out, we crossed with another group that was coming in. And guess what they were from? Chiapas. They were going up to Baghdad, Sister Luz, hospital, but not enough to go down. And we left, as I say, hundreds of people there, and shock and awe began. And you know what? Although we had sent the coordinates of where we were, where we had positioned ourselves onto the White House just to make sure they knew where we were. Rumsfeld was calling us war criminals at this moment. Not one of those sites got bombed. All of them been hit in '91 during the first Gulf War. We had gone to the UN, and they said, these are civilian sites, you're okay, not military sites. None of the, I don't know if it was Bush's bad aim, or, or it was just the fact that we were there. Of course, we didn't stop this terrible war, and this terrible war continues to go on. We need to be thinking about this terrible war all the time. So, being a Zapatista where you are can get you into those kind of problems. Often you're going to stand between 2 governments or 2 government powers, trying to make yourself independent of both of them, taking a position that is an autonomous position, And I think, so just to give you a warning that being a Zapatista where you are implies a lot of risks. It implies a lot of risks to be speaking the truth to power, And that's, I think, what we're about here now. Although it's difficult, being a Zapatista where you are means you confront the sheriff deputies at South Central Farms of the Saddam government in Baghdad, you might go to jail, you might get your head beaten and your back broke like mine was nearly by Israeli goons a couple of years ago, picking olives in Palestine. We really don't have any option but to be Zapatistas where we are, where we live, The political parties don't represent us. We can't go to them and say, do what you need to do the right thing, because politicians do not do the right thing. No. The political class has no interest in our problems. The mal gobierno, as the Zapatistas call it, the bad government, isn't going to fix things up for us at all. Everything is really in our hands, And when we think about where we live, we live in a place that's not a democratic country. I just saw some statistics came into me on the internet last night that since 2000, 2006, there's been a 26% increase in what we call extreme poverty, not in Mexico, over here in the United States. We have 16 million citizens now living in extreme poverty in the United States, the highest number ever. Government is not taking care of that. The political parties are not taking care of it. The political class doesn't take care of it. We have no option but to take care of it ourselves, to make this into a democratic country that feeds its people, that gives its people a voice. People are not just hungry for food, they're hungry for justice, they're hungry for democracy, they're hungry for freedom, We got to satisfy all of those hungry. And it's not those guys that are going to do it. It's going to be us that are responsible for this. I'm going to get out of here with a poem. Little known as it is, what I really am is a poet. I might talk a lot and write some books like that, but basically I'm a poet. And this is a poem from poems are really made by margins, where you put your margins. So this is really from a speech by a guy I was talking about, Su Comandante Marcos. He made it back in 2001, when the Zapatistas marched up from Chiapas up to Mexico City to demand the enforcement of an Indian rights law that, as I said, the government could never do. We call that the March to People the Color of the Earth. He delivered a speech at the Polytechnical Institute in Mexico City, where a lot of indigenous students go, a lot of Indian students and their parents were there that day, the folks that wipe off your windshield in traffic and clean out the toilets and mop the pots and carry the bricks who work at the very bottom rung of Mexican society. Marcos kept using this word, hasta cuando. It means until when. That's the title. This is Mexico. From on high, they take away our land. And in a single night, we build them an airport. And we will never get to fly in one of their airplanes. In a single day, we build them a shopping mall. And we will never have the money to buy the things there. For then, we erect shining modern hotels. And we will never be able to sleep in those soft beds. We have raised up a world from which we are excluded, one that will never accept us. And yet this world would not exist without us. And we are you. You made a house, but someone else lives in it. You dug the drainage, you filled in the street, you planted the garden, you built the furniture, you went for the food, you prepared the meal. And now you are on the outside of those walls, and misery shares your table. If you get sick, they tell you, hang on, just endure. If you are hungry, they tell you, aguántate, hang on, just endure. If you live badly, they tell you, just endure. If they don't pay you a living wage, if they throw you in jail unjustly, they tell you, hang on, aguántate, just endure. If they don't let you speak, just endure. If they forget you, if you die, they tell you, aguántate, hang on, just endure. Until when? Until when? The answer that is missing is ours. That of the worker, that of the unemployed, the disabled, that of the garment worker, the construction worker, the street clown, the waitress, the mariachis, the prostitutes, that of the indigenas, of the campesinos, the laborers, the students, the housewives, the lesbians and the gays, the reporters, the professors, the peasants, our grandfathers, our young. That is who we are. Just endure. ¿Cuándo? ¿Hasta cuándo? Until when? Thank you.
Would you all like to have, we've got a few more minutes, would you like questions of John?
Yeah.
Will you go and confront people because I can't see the hands on it?
John, the only thing you did not include, sir, God bless you, is the famous phrase of Benito Juarez. What did Benito Juarez say was the foundation of all civilization in the world? It's cast in bronze down here next to the Gettysburg Address that nobody pays any attention to.
Tell us.
Respect for the rights of others is peace. It's fundamental.
Right. Anybody else out there?
Anybody else have a voice?
Anybody else going to talk? Because if you're not going to talk to me, what you got to do is talk to each other.
There's one over here.
Okay.
Did you experience anything down in Chiapas with illegal logging?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of illegal logging in Chiapas right now, and it's having a big problem just today. The Lacandon jungle is the last, one of the last two rainforests in Mexico. Traditionally has been logged out in terms of precious hardwoods, mahogany and cedar, and it definitely is on its way out. You know, we've lost about 3/4 of the jungle at this point, and the logging goes on as the economic situation grows more cruel. That's the only way I can say it tortillas jumping from 6 to 18 pesos in the first 50 days of Felipe Calderon's administration. The communities in the jungle have no, well, they have other options, but the thing that they resort to right away is cutting down the trees. Zapatistas have set up roadblocks to keep the precious woods from being brought out of the jungle. So that's a very active and living conflict that goes on all the time. Has been traditionally a battle in the jungle way back to the time of the great author B. Trade and the Monteria novels. But it's going on right today.
You're talking about logging?
As we speak, there's roadblocks trying to keep the precious woods from being brought out of the jungle.
Any other questions?
There? Vamos,
You keep saying about how so many people are losing faith in government because the government is just not doing anything or is not being responsive. But at the same time, government is really probably the one thing that can help us get some of the things that we need, like nationalized health care or, money towards schools. I mean, do you have any hopes at all for governing working again?
Well, government doesn't work unless, we're organized down here as that organized, I don't know, call it a lobby if you want, or a special interest group, or whatever you want to call it, but government doesn't work unless we are in the streets, in their face, in their offices, unless we are on top of them all the time, and that doesn't mean the government is in charge, it means that we're in charge. So the only way you can make government work, those government institutions which do, as you say, provide things like health care, at the same time fight wars that, result in $1 trillion defense budgets, The job of the government is precisely that, is to take care of its people, not to fight wars. But it doesn't work unless we're an organized people, unless we are on the march, unless we are all the time applying that kind of pressure to make it work. And then when that doesn't work, then we got to go out and build our own, take care of it for ourselves.
Question here, sir?
Okay.
John, U.S. Congressman Barney Frank made an interesting comment about 2 months ago. He said that the issue is not too little government. The issue should be bigger, better government that involves day-to-day people from the bottom up. Something that the Franklin D. Roosevelt administration tried to do. As the Roosevelt administration began to move to the center, it was accused of being too far on the left by the military-industrial enemies of his time. So our problem, it seems, if you would agree or disagree, sir, is separating government from the military-industrial complex that's taken on its own soul, without a soul, that's now controlling most of the world and all of its resources.
Well, I think if we're going to have that government from down below, lowest day abajo, from down below, I don't think we need a bigger government. I think we need to break that government into controllable pieces, so that, we have, again, a better chance at being able to influence those governments on a local level. So I wouldn't buy the bigger government. I definitely would buy the up from the bottom, the los de abajo concept of being able to control your government. That has to be a much smaller chunk of government, So long as we grow this thing the way it's been growing, so long as we put to Washington in this thing, we lose control. We need to have it. We have that kind of control right here. And know who those people that are making decisions, go to work in school with them every day and be talking to them all the time, so we can apply that kind of control. The further government gets away from us, the bigger government gets, the less chance we have to be heard. Yeah.
What's going on with Obrador in Mexico this time?
López Obrador, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Does it ring a bell with other people here? Okay. Andrés Manuel won the election on July 2nd. There's no question that he won the election. Unfortunately, in the many, many years I've been working in Mexico, I've become an expert on electoral fraud. It's not hard, actually, once you've been through one of these things. This is one of the most descarado. I always say that brazen stealing of an elections I've ever seen in the many years that I've been working in Mexico. We're talking the last 22 years in a row, and I actually wrote my first article in Mexico nearly 50 years ago on logging in the state of Michoacan. What happened after the election, I think, is what was tremendously significant and remains tremendously significant. It's just to give you some, statistical way to quantify it. The election was held on July 2nd. On July 5th, López Obrador called for a massive rally in the Zócalo Plaza in Mexico City, and 500,000 people showed up. My 500,000 people is pretty good. Ojalá that we could put 500,000 people in the street anywhere at some time. So, okay, we're going to come back here on July 16th. So 10 days after that, people came back, and we had 1.2 million people on a march. Pretty interesting to walk with 1.2 million people with humanity. Okay, said Andrés Manuel, that was good. Let's try it again on July 30th. And on July 30th, 2.4 million people showed up. Largest political demonstration in the history of Mexico. These were historic moments. And at that point, instead of sending people back to their towns and villages and saying, we'll try it again, he said, hey, I got an idea, let's just stay here. And so for 7 weeks, we had this incredible planton, this incredible encampment stretched for 13 kilometers through Mexico City from the central Plaza de Zócalo, all through the Centro Histórico, all down Paseo de Reforma, through Chapultepec Park, out to the Ritchie district of Polanco and beyond. People living in tents on the street, creating their own communities, instant communities, lots of creative activity, lots of poets and singers, and university classes and forums. It was, this instantaneous community that was constructed. And a moment at the height of the rainy season in Mexico, when the rain and the hail came down and flooded out the camps, the people living under the tents, and the people would stand there and they would chant, "Llueve, llueve, llueve, y el pueblo no se mueve." It rains and the people don't move. It was, I think, one of the most exciting outbursts of mass protest that I have ever been involved in. I've been doing this work for half a century. The demonstration culminated with the National Democratic Convention on September 16th, Mexican Independence Day. López Obrador was elected the legitimate president of Mexico. On November 20th, he was inaugurated, another 1 million people in the Zócalo on the Great Plaza. And on December 1st, the man that was awarded the election, Felipe Calderón, tried to be inaugurated as well. He was, in fact, inaugurated a minute past midnight from Los Pinos, the Mexican White House, surrounded by military officers with a voice-off swearing him in. We don't even know who was swearing him in. And the next day, because López Obrador's supporters had taken the tribune of Congress and Calderón could not get on to actually pin the sash on, the military brings him into the back of the stage, clears the dial, brings him to the microphone. He's there for 3 minutes, putting on the sash, moving out. And now he's supposed to be the president of Mexico, Half the country does not believe he's the legitimate president of the country. As I mentioned, in the first 50 days of his administration, the price of tortilla tripled from 6 to 18 pesos. The price of virtually every household staple tripled. In a country where 70 million out of 103 million people are living around the poverty line, I mean, you want to know why people are coming across the border? I don't have to tell you anything more than that, 22 million of those 70 million people living in extreme poverty, 13 million kids every day. The only food they get is that tortilla, which just went up from 6 to 18 pesos. López Obrador has been out in the countryside, way out in the outback, moving from town to town and village to village, reinforcing and building the movement from the bottom up. The day I left Mexico, January 31st, we had a march in Mexico City against the price hikes, when it was what they call cacerolazos, where thousands of housewives came out with pots and pans and banged on them, creating a din throughout the entire city. About 250,000 people on that march. I don't want to quantify this thing because, we'll never top 2.4 million in a while, at least. But this continues. We have a president that has no legitimacy, very much like George Bush after Florida in 2000. you know, who's trying to govern the country, who really has no mandate in the country, and Lopez Obrador, and to some extent his party, although it's a bit distinct, Lopez Obrador is much greater, his force is much greater than that of his party, the Party of the Democratic Revolution, the PRD, and indeed in many respects, the support movement for him surpassed the political parties and surpassed the political class. Lopez Obrador became this, there's an expression in Mexico, a costal, a burlap bag in which everyone deposited their grievances. And, you know, he has the gift to be able to articulate those grievances. Ongoing process. As I say, we're about 75 days into the Calderon administration. Who knows how much longer he's going to exist. Political struggle in Mexico. People do not forget, you know, that's one thing about Mexico is, you know, Mexicans have a memory that doesn't go away. And people that took part in what happened last summer in this incredible outpouring from down below certainly treasure that memory and feel as if they are part of history. So this story is ongoing. All my books end with the phrase, "to be continued." And this story is to be continued.
Hello, I'm sorry. Hello, is there anyone that didn't get a lunch? Because, let me know, right here. If you didn't get a lunch, please let me know. We're going to do it better? Okay, good. 1, 2, how many? 3, 4, 4. Okay. Okay, we're gonna get you some more lunches, and just let us know where you're at. We're taking you the lunch to your room.
Good afternoon. I'll take checks, but I would prefer cash.
Who do you make them out to?
Me.
Okay, John Ross.
8 letters.
It's 5 letters, not the 4-letter character. I did the same thing. 4 letters, no 5 letters.
What? Well, she is owned by the same mother that I put it, broke it out to.
Do you have any more of the other books?
No, I only had a couple and they got picked up right away. There you go. Okay? That right here. Okay, can I sign them for you?
Yes, sir. Very good. Back.
Who do I sign them?
I can.
Ken.
Yeah. There you go.
Yes, for Martha.
There you go, Ken. 1.
All right.
Thank you.
Couldn't come last night. Martha. She and I went down to Chiapas.
When was that?
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm able to get it. I know. I will use the book. Yeah, actually, because we don't have a cut-out version here yet. And it's not really my area.
Get more, I can order.
And Ms. Wilson guaranteed you are not bound.
Oh, that's all right, don't worry.
No. Oh, so it was particular where you were going to?
They went there.
Who should have read this one too? Me?
Again, Ms. Wilson, thank you. That's my honor and honor.
Thank you.
Good, how are you?
The thin ones, I got one of each.
Okay. That's on the check?
Yeah, it's on the check.
Very hardworking and serious, I know.
Yep.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, I need to get over it. I know. I'm one of those that I will use the book. Yeah, actually, because we don't have a Catholic version here. And it's not really my area.
Oh, hold on. That's okay.
I'm trying to. I don't know when I'm going to be successful.
Just make it out to you, Ms. Wilson.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have enough?
Yeah, I got
Where you were going?
Who should have read this one too? Me?
Again, Ms. Wilson, thank you. That's my honor and honor.
Thank you.
Good, how are you?
I'm actually a presenter here, and I'll be talking about the growing gap between the rich and the poor and the need for having a living wage. And I'm here at the Coastal Bend Social Forum, which is sponsored by the Center for Progressive Studies and Culture, and it's like a grassroots community organization, kind of, I feel like almost like an inspirational kind of meeting to keep us energized, because I think everybody here is really invested in their community and they want good things to happen. They're ready for change, and we just had the 2 guest speakers, and they were inspiring, and I had some students that were here, and I know that they're ready to go back to the university and start talking about doing things, you know, not just learning but doing. I'm actually a sociology professor at the university, and my original specialization is gerontology and education, those 2 areas. But since I've been there, I've been focusing on social class and inequality. And really what I've been committed to doing is trying to get people to stop thinking about themselves as individuals and start thinking about our quality of life and our community, and that we're a part of a larger social structure, and that, you know, we could do better. But in order to do better, we have to think about how our society is organized and how that impacts our life chances, and that, you know, we were more engaged and we thought about it ourselves as a collective, we could improve everybody's lives in addition to improving our own. And I came to this because I totally committed to the organization's mission about, you know, being in the community and doing things not just how I think they should be done because I'm an academic, but it's kind of like that, what Diane Wilson was talking about, the kind of, almost like you lead by following. You listen to what other people want, and you talk about it, and you come to some sort of consensus. And we need some really big transformations in our society, I think, so that's why I'm here.
I'm with you.
I'm ready. Well, I'm about to say here.
Very good. Very good.
Awesome.
Anything else you'd like to say?
What else? I hope they do this again, and you know, we've been to one, and hopefully it'll get the word out. And I'm looking forward to having more and bringing more students. I think we're on the cusp of good things. You know, good things to come, I think.
All right.
This has been a very stimulating day for me and for my wife. We're members of Native Descendants Circle. It's a Native American church. We're of Native ancestry, indigenous ancestry. And I came basically to hear the guest speaker, John Ross, dealing with an indigenous movement in southern Mexico, which I think is a good example for all of us as to how to work from the ground up to help all people, but certainly indigenous people. I think it's exciting that in this part of the Gulf Coast we actually have people who are clear thinkers, who are open to new and old concepts about justice and solidarity and these kind of things. And I'm finding a whole group of new friends here today that I didn't know were in this area. So I'm very grateful for the Universalist Church that allowed us to meet here and would host a forum like this. I'm hoping we'll have more of these things.
The Peace and Justice Coalition here. That's what I'm primarily with. And this has been just wonderful. We went to a thing by
Dr. Lorraine
Dr.
Stain.
Lorraine Stain.
That's me.
And it was most informative.
Don't go away.
And extremely
I
good.
gotta go give John his, I'll be back.
And then we talked about the economy, and that was fine. But the health thing was really wonderful. And the speakers were just beyond compare. Diane Wilson speaks, she writes like she speaks, and it's very, very, very exciting.
My name is Diane Wilson, D-I-A-N-E, Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N, and I'm at the Progressive Social Forum, and quite frankly, I didn't realize there was a progressive group around this area. You know, I'm from Seadrift, which is a little coastal town a little bit further up there, and we got a lot of fishing people and a lot of industry down there, just like this area here. And it's very conservative, and have a tremendous battle getting the message out, because most people are so afraid. And so when I had an invitation from the Progressive Social Forum to come here and talk, I was delighted. And one, I was real surprised of how many people showed up, because I thought I would be me and a few others, quite frankly, and to see this many people this close to my neck of the woods, that's progress. I think it's real progress, and I think it was great, and the people here have been extremely generous, and they made me feel so good, flattered me, you know, and it was standing up for what I believed about the Bay, because all the industry that was coming in was going to destroy it. And so I stood up for something I loved, and it has totally changed who I was. It's changed the direction my life has went. I've been to Baghdad, I've been to Syria, I've been to Lebanon, I've been to India, I've been to Taiwan, and I'm just nothing but a little fishing woman. And so it's been amazing. It's been an amazing trip, and it's 20 years, and I'm still very much involved. I was a co-founder of Code Pink, Women for Peace. I'm another co-founder for the Texas Jail Project. We're very much involved in the criminal justice system in the county jails in Texas, and I've got my own environmental group and writing another book.
All right.
You know, doing all right.
It was wonderful hearing you speak today.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us here in
It's
Corpus
been a
and
wonderful,
coming down.
This is a really good group. It's a real good group. I was very surprised.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's a good sign when progressive got this much of a group.
I was involved in the early planning of this activity. I think it's long overdue for Corpus Christi that citizens start looking at how they can get involved in solving local problems and becoming part of the answer instead of waiting for somebody else to do it. And also presented today, which was a great opportunity for myself. So
We did some studies over there.
What did you speak about today?
I spoke about media distortion and about how mainstream media tends to support the power structure as opposed to tell the real story. And it was very well received. We had a packed house in there and a great session. So it was really worthwhile. It was a great turnout too.
How many people came out today, you think?
I'm not sure, but I think it's probably 150 people.
150
Yeah.
people? Did you expect that many people to come out?
I figured it would be a success if we had 100 people, so I was ecstatic.
So you consider the event a success?
Absolutely.
Are there any plans for the future for the event?
Yeah, we plan on this being an annual event, and next year we hope to have it a 2-day event, maybe even a 2.5-day event, where the second day is actually where people get into working groups and decide where they're going to do about these issues in the future and how they're going to take part in the solution.
Learning practical real-world applications
Yes.
for the event.
Yeah. Kicking off little think tanks and working groups to actually tackle these problems that we've talked about. This will be the first of many.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, thanks. Thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
I guess.
Okay.
I'm the chairman of the PPC. We kind of.
What is the PPC?
The Progressive Populist Caucus. We organized the center. We're organizing it as the Center for Progressive Studies and Culture, and that's as a nonprofit, and that's the entity that that sponsored the social forum today. February 24th, 2007, and it's the first annual social forum. We anticipate having one each year from now on, and I'm sure it's going to get better and bigger and better. This is our first one, the first experience we've had with this in Corpus Christi. It's probably the first time in Corpus Christi anybody has had any kind of a progressive type social forum. And I counted about 120 people earlier today. I think the purpose of it is to educate ourselves and others about issues that are relevant to the community, and also so that some of us maybe can meet new people and network with other people and their ideas. I think that's happening already, and hopefully each year it'll get bigger and bigger, more important. Through those experiences, that's the purpose of these gatherings, is that we don't have to experience everything out there, but we can learn through others and through their experiences, and expand our own experiences that way. It's been a great day.
I'm in Corpus Christi, Texas. I was invited to the social forum here, Texas Bend Social Forum, to talk about being a Zapatista where you live.
What is being a Zapatista where you live?
It means to speak truth to power, take action against those that are oppressing your family and your family's neighbors and the people in your own community, and to do it in such a way that, we're just not following leaders, so that people do actions together, collectively, reach consensus on what they're going. We don't need hierarchies to tell us what to do. Get out there and do it together, and really work as a community against those forces which are oppressing the community.
Earlier when you were speaking, and there was beautiful stories that you did say, John, thank you. Whenever you're talking about social change and being, calling the Z, being a Z or a Zap or a Zapatista, how do you believe that being a Zapatista where you are can change poverty and these social issues?
Well, I think there's, when we talk about being a Zapatista where we are, some of the most important people that need to be Zapatista where they are the poorest people. We always have to look down to the bottom in our neighborhoods, in our communities. Those people are getting screwed the most. I do a journalism course every once in a while called Rebel Journalism, and people say, well, what? How do you do this? What do you do? I said, well, the first thing you do, you got to find out who's getting screwed, who's doing the screwing, and how we can change that equation. And I think that's very much that concept of being a Zapatista where you are. We have to identify those sources of oppression in our communities. I think Diane Wilson did a marvelous job talking about Formosa. There's lots of other polluters out here in the Bay. That's something that oppresses our community, destroys our place. And much of the struggles that we're about, much of the struggles the Zapatistas are about, and I see struggles all across this country as well, are struggles of defense of place. And so it's one very important part of being a Zapatista where you are, defending the place where you live.
You also referenced your experience John, in Baghdad and in other countries in Israel and Palestine, working for autonomy in those countries. Now, with the war that we have right now, how in the day, what years was it that you were in Baghdad? Let's say
we were in Baghdad right up until the bombing began, until the war began 4 years ago on March 18th.
Mm-hmm. And you were there for what reason?
We were there as human shields in Baghdad. We were there to interpose our bodies between the bombs of Bush and the Iraqi people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a life-changing experience for many of us. We went off there thinking we might not come back. There was a 50-50 chance or a 60-40 chance or whatever it was. We were putting our lives on the line.
Lives on the line for what?
To stop this war in defense of the Iraqi people, in defense of sovereignty of the Iraqi people, in defense of the people of the Middle East who are constantly subject to, there's no other word for it, but this imperialist outreach that the U.S. government wants to impose on those lands, out there.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there to draw attention to that. We were there to challenge the Bush administration to bomb us on the places that we were. They didn't, I think that although the war went on, we didn't stop the war. We did at least stop the bombings of the places that we were, to electricity generating plants, to water treatment plants, food storage warehouse, and a refinery. So, I think we had some impact on doing that, and what we had an impact on was ourselves. I think it changed our lives going out there when you do that, and put yourself at risk, in harm's way, together, collectively, because that's always the key, Something changes inside, and I think we build up a kind of solidarity with the Iraqi people. I walked out of there with a lot of new people to know, and a lot of new compañeros, and we're still in communication with each other and with folks in Iraq all the time, every single day sometimes, It's an eyeful to hear what our people on the ground there tell us about what's going on. It's heartbreaking. I think that the social forums are popping up everywhere. This is probably not the only social forum being held today somewhere in the world. And it's an important development to be able to put people in one community, one country, one state, whatever the demarcations are, to put them together in the same room, to find out what people are doing, take that kind of inventory of struggle in your local community, to network up. So many of these problems really have common roots, so we need to, my message is always talk to each other, And I think that's really what social forums do. They bring people together to talk to each other about what the social problems are in their community and how they can be changed. Well, no, it's just it's good to be here, and it's good to. The best thing about being here today were two things. One was listening to Diane Wilson talking about fighting a local power mogul here that is destroying people's lives in their bay. And the other thing was to see this room filled up and, keep on filling up those rooms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sylvia Samaniego, and I am the director for the Center for Progressive Studies and Culture, and then I'm also the chair for the South Texas Alliance for Peace and Justice. Well, this started very humbly. A couple of, maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, when we met at a retreat in a room that Les Cassidy had booked for us. And out of that room came lots of ideas. And one of those ideas was to have this forum. And so we wrote it down in the calendar, but you know how it is. You don't know whether it's going to happen or not. And all of a sudden, we started making it happen 6 months ago. Everything has come together as I think the universe usually does when you're working with it and not against it. Everything that is happening here, I think, was meant to be, because it really has not. It's been. I'm not going to say it's been that easy, but it hasn't been that hard. And it's amazing how 6-7 people put this event together. We have 22 speakers when we didn't even think we could get 10.
What were some of the topics today?
The topics were universal health care, which was standing room only, and they're asking that Lorraine come back and do something on that. And then we have, of course, the immigration, which is a big issue here in our, Texas borders. And we had also the environmental brigades. We have right now going the ACLU, which is, again, another standing room only. So this just, all kinds of issues, all kinds of people, like this man was just saying, he goes, I didn't know this existed. I didn't know there was people like me. And that's what it is. You find that there are people like us. We just haven't found a way to get connected. And this is a way for all of us to get connected, to just share our, our talents, our gifts. That's, I think we're walkers and talkers. So we're hoping to spread that good news and, let wherever it leads us, it will lead us to something I know more, even higher.
Well, I'm a student at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. My major is a speech comm major, and the class that I'm with is a small group communication. And within that class, we are required to find a nonprofit organization and help them out with any needs necessarily. That's including community service and going in their foundation and providing any needs necessary, if it's financial, assistance in organization or whatnot. So that's what's brought us here today. For me, with this forum, it's really showed me like the importance of getting involved. Like I know I was involved with a lot of stuff with 4-H and FFA in high school, but this has really opened my eyes. Like with this today, this forum, just of what's in our society, in our community that needs addressed and that needs help and issues that are important. And some of these issues, a lot of them so far that I've been to, are very important. Yet it's hush hush. It's put back away. We don't want to talk about that. Don't bring that up. Keep your mouth shut. Type deal. And it's the importance of it is just being able to get that voice out and getting out to these people. And it's been the biggest learning experience for me so far.
Well, I'm here because I'm with Portside Books. We are Corpus's first and only radical, collectively run bookstore, and it's just a bunch of people who got together and decided that we needed to share radical literature with the community. We need people to understand, what's going on. If they have any questions about, anarchism, Marxism, feminist rights, animal issues, environmentalism, that Portside Books is not only a place where you can get information, but it's a safe space for us to communicate about it. And so it's really not just a bookstore, but it's also a community center. And so we're here because the Social Forum invited us, and that John Ross was here, and we are also very big into the Zapatista movement stuff. So just to support that and to really get people to know about who we are. We just started in December. It's just a bunch of kids with books who want to get something happening. So. I mean, there are like older people here in the community. There are young people. There are people of color, and so we're all we do have our different views, but at least we're here and trying to communicate and trying to get something going. And this forum is enough just to have people listen to what some of the subjects that are very pertinent to us, and also just question it. So. I mean, it's about communication. That's what really counts. So, I mean, I'm a big believer in being educated outside of the education system and always just asking questions. And I've learned so much more by asking people out on the streets why than I've ever learned in a classroom. And this is a situation where we're just sitting around talking to each other. And we're asking each other why, and we're learning so much from each other. So that's what's important, and that's what counts, and that's why I like it. So.
I'm Lorraine Stain, a family practitioner in Aransas Pass, and I've been a member of the Corpus Christi Progressive Populist Caucus now for about a year and a half. In fact, I do the secretary or scribe job of that. And currently we're starting a new non-for-profit, which is the Progressive Center for Culture and Studies, and it's located in the Progressive Center, which is at 413 Waco. We're hoping that this will grow as a place for people to meet, to talk about social issues, peace issues, issues that affect all of the coastal Bend area. And I was asked to be a speaker this morning on universal health care. This is an issue I think is extremely important to the people of the coastal Bend, but all of the United States. We need to start having health care available to everyone at the same level, cut the red tape in becoming insured, and cut the red tape in providing health care for everyone. There are 46 million people in the United States that are uninsured, and it's hindering their ability to take good care of themselves and live healthy and prosperous lives.
Very nice. how do you believe that this social forum has affected the people here today and will affect the community in the future?
We don't really know, and in fact networking amongst each other is going to be an important part of the forum. Finding people of like interest, like passions. Certainly our speakers today, Diane Wilson and John Ross, both activists in their own right, gave us a lot of enthusiasm about becoming Zapatistas where we are, or unreasonable women, to pursue the goals of the things that are important to all mankind: peace, justice, health, education, living our lives to the fullest, and all being the best human beings that we can be.
Yeah, I'm the development director at the ACLU of Texas, based in Austin, and I was invited down by Les Cassidy, who's a local attorney and one of the organizers of this conference. And Les and other supporters of the ACLU, including folks involved with the Progressive Center, are hoping to establish a chapter of the ACLU here in Corpus Christi. So we came down to talk to folks about civil rights and individual liberty, and to help move forward with the idea of a local chapter, and in general to support this kind of organization and coalition of progressive folks who are active here in the Coastal Bend area. I live in Austin, and people you sort of feel like you're in a bubble when you're in Austin compared to the rest of Texas, because it is, in some cases, kind of an oasis from some of the conservatism and some of the right-wing aspects that you see in other parts of Texas. And so it's really it's inspiring for me to come to Corpus Christi and to meet so many folks who are concerned about the future of our nation and our state, and are not just been concerned, but are doing very positive and fulfilling and enlightening work to help make things better. So it's a chance for me to recharge my batteries and to meet some of the wonderful folks that you have here who are doing great work. The social forums that I've been to in Austin and in other places are a lot similar to this one. I think that this group should be proud. I mean, it looked to me that there were at least 100 people here today, and that's an impressive number for a community of any size. And but particularly for a sort of medium-sized city like Corpus Christi, I think it's a really impressive turnout and bodes really well for future success. And beyond that, Larry, I've had a chance to spend a couple of days here. I've been to the Progressive Center building that you guys have here. I've met a lot of ACLU supporters and folks who are involved in the Progressive Center, and it's just been we've been just really wonderfully received and welcomed, and everyone's been so nice and friendly. So it's been really a wonderful experience.
Good. So you said there are plans for the ACLU to start a chapter here in Corpus Christi?
Yeah, well, our state office is really sort of reaching our hand out, looking for groups of volunteers and activists who are ready to take on leadership roles in a volunteer-led chapter here in Corpus Christi, to monitor sort of local civil rights and civil liberties issues, to have a local presence for our organization in this area, to do public education and outreach activities, and to help unite our organization. You know, really, it's in order to protect the civil rights and the individual liberties of all people, our organization needs to be strong at the national level, strong at the state level, and strong at the local level. And so when we look around the state of Texas, Corpus Christi, we think, is the best next place for an ACLU chapter. We have 10 active chapters in Texas now, and we hope that Corpus will be the 11th.
I'm Sherry Del Rio, Hospitality Chair of the Social Forum that is being presented today by the Progressive Center and the Center for Progressive Studies. I think I got the last title right.
Yeah.
Okay. We've been planning this for several months. It's our first effort. We had a group of presenters that were the idea about it was getting the community together to talk about community issues and what we can do about it. You know, uniting, networking, talking about the problems and trying to find some solutions. Certainly offering education to a lot of people perhaps who hadn't thought about some of these problems. I think we had a great turnout, probably off and on 200 people today. We ran out of food twice. That's a good sign. We had a lot of people come in. And we're thrilled. It's our first effort. We're tired and just thrilled about it. Very good response. The 2 keynote speakers were wonderful. Diane Wilson was here. I'm sure you have footage of all of this. John Ross. Diane Wilson is kind of a personal hero of mine, so it was very exciting to meet her.
What are some of the things that you've heard from the people who attended the forum today?
I've not gotten to go to any of the presentations today because I really had to be kind of out and available, and so I've heard from people as they came out of the rooms, and I have not heard one criticism. That we've had 5 speakers going on at a time all day long, a huge number. We sent out calls for presenters and thought we'd be lucky if we got 10 responses, and we wound up unfortunately having to turn away presenters, people who wanted to present. But I've heard nothing but positive response today to what they heard going on in those rooms.
What were some of the diversity of issues that were being talked about? Are these issues all important to Corpus Christi?
All of them were important to Corpus Christi. Poverty, teenage pregnancy, violence in schools. The ACLU was here. I'll forget way too many. But yes, we felt like we wanted to invite people, all of who were going to give something that was relevant to Corpus Christi. And most of the presenters were local. The 2 keynote speakers were not, but they were certainly talking about issues that are relevant here. One thing, there were a lot of people who were here today that didn't know the other people were around. You know, or they didn't know there was anyone in Corpus Christi or the area who was involved in that kind of environmental fight or that kind of work with poverty in the neighborhoods or whatever. So I think probably one of the best things that can come out of this is that people know each other and that things will happen because of that. They'll happen not necessarily through us. They'll happen through networking that happened here and people taking action and getting together and doing things, making it happen, making the changes. And that's what we wanted.
And leave her in.
You can call for anything, and then it's up to them whether or not they're going to pursue it. I have to say Adult Protective Services here in town is very, very busy. But if you call and make a complaint, they have to look into it. So, yes, please do. Adult Protective Services is one of the numbers you need to know. And it also covers self-neglect. Now, I had a neighbor who was 88, didn't have family or didn't stay in touch with her family, and a lot of times she wasn't eating and she wasn't taking her medicine. And I really considered calling until I sat down with her one day and talked to her and just explained in layman's terms why she had to take her high blood pressure medicine, how it worked. And then she just started taking it. And like 6 months later, she says to me, "Oh my God, you know I haven't fallen since I started taking that stuff, and I feel so much better." And you know, and making sure she was eating and everything. But I really came this close to calling Adult Protective Services because they would at least send a caseworker, and somebody would be checking in on her weekly at least. So they're one of the main places to call if you suspect either abuse, exploitation, or self-neglect. And then, or family neglect.
Understand that many of you have been involved in the planning and as well in engaging in discussion groups around the book and the issues. So there's been a lot of preparation for this, and I greatly appreciate that. We're here tonight because we share a deep concern for the future of our nation and the human species. I trust that many of you also share my belief that this is an extraordinary moment of creative opportunity, born of a profound moment of awakening to the reality that we humans, in living out the reckless exuberance of our adolescence, have gotten ourselves into some serious trouble. It's time to take the step to species maturity. Now, motivated by the same sense of crisis and opportunity that brings us together here tonight, gatherings similar to our own are taking place throughout the United States and the world. Herein lies our source of hope, as this is the demonstration of the awakening. Now, the motivating force of any particular gathering may be global climate change, racism, peace, democracy, spiritual renewal, peak oil, economic justice, or any number of similar topics. Each, however, deals with the need for deep changes in our relationship to one another and Earth. Our generation has lived through an extraordinary shrinking of geographical space and expansion of intercultural exchange and communication. And that is key to the change that's taking place.
I'm a volunteer from Texas A&M at Corpus Christi.
A volunteer from with a particular class, or?
Yeah, the small group communications class for Dr. Hansen.
Okay, cool. What brought you here today?
Well, we looked for an organization to work with that really kind of like was helping it with community development, and the social forum for Progressive Center just looked really great.
Very good. How did you hear about it?
Well, we have a listserv, an online account with Dr. Hansen, and we had a bunch of community organizations put their things on the website, and we found them through there.
And what are you doing here today? Your job, I guess, as a volunteer, your position?
I'm a room assistant, so whatever the presenters need, I help them out and give them a little time warning when it's about 5 minutes till their speech needs to end.
Have you had a chance to listen to any of the speeches today?
I have. It's been really interesting. I got to sit in on the ACLU speech and also the, what was the other one? The first one was, I've forgotten. It's been a long day. Sorry. Capital punishment, that one was really interesting. I learned a lot about that. I didn't know that it actually costs more to execute someone than to keep them in jail for life. And also, domestic violence and sexual assault is a social problem. Tough subject, but it was really informative and interesting.
What were some of the reactions in the rooms, or some of the people where they were talking while it was going on? Do you recall?
Specifically? The capital punishment one, I think everyone was surprised to find out that we'd already executed, I think they said 5 people in the first 2 months of this year, which is crazy. Domestic violence one, not so much surprise as just unaware of how much support the South Texas organization helps. And the ACLU, I think everyone was really excited about the opportunity to bring a chapter to Corpus Christi.
So would it be said that you learned some things today?
Oh, absolutely.
Room A through 15?
Yeah. Come on in, come on in. This is one of the health fairs, residents from the Colonia. And this is, I think this is, what does it say there, Jenny?
Prescriptions. We've managed to do that too.
We have a program where they give them prescriptions, free prescriptions. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't get it, but we're lucky.
But at least, we've been fortunate.
Room B through 15?
So if CCIC is willing to lose the $188,000, we don't have to have it. We don't have to have it. But if you want that money, you've got to abide by.
You don't have to. I mean, if we could propose to them a palatable alternative to Aim for Success, but the problem is the feedback from parents is they love it. And yes, because it reassures parents we're going to help your kids be safe. And parents are frightened.
Have they come and seen that program?
Yes, and they laugh and they clap.
They do?
Yes, they laugh at all the same. They laugh at all the same parts that the children do, and they clap. And I mean, I've been to a couple of the adult presentations, and every once in a while there's like 1 or 2 people that are very upset. And the first time that I went, I was upset, and I tried to ask questions. I came back to the school the next day to watch the program, and I got escorted off campus by police.
Oh my God. You are kidding.
And I was wearing a blazer and black pants and my hair in a bun, and
pearls. So
Yeah, do the whole
and they
professional
said, but what did they say was the reason you were being escorted
they were
off?
scared because I would say something. They were scared that I was going to say something to children. And I told them, well, the only reason I said something in the evening was because I thought, as adults, we could have a conversation.
They have a thing for parents the night before.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but what happens though is that the people that give us the money, the federal money, say, what we are going to do is go into your schools and come in not unannounced, and we're going to watch your programs and listen to what happens. And if you deviate away from this 8-point program, we discontinue the funding. And so
That's blackmail.
That really is.
But that's how that funding is.
Right.
So
So
it used to become with only 5 points, and you could get away. You could teach a lot of positive life skills, leadership skills, communication skills. You could do a lot of positive things. Then they ratcheted it down even further to have these very clear messages that limit what you can say. And then this industry has sprung up with these people who have these presentations and are making a lot of money.
Lots of money.
And then why don't we have something like with Texas A&M or with some entity, public entity who has a communications department to say we want to create a message and we need student help and this will be part of your out-of-school project.
I think I think we'd be glad to go down there and try to sell them something to replace it. But we have to come up with a package to replace it.
Down to CCA's.
Yes.
And
But this is nationwide.
One of the things I want to mention, when you were saying all these rules have been put against the high school and you and everybody else, this morning I was with domestic violence and there's no rules at all. How can it be that there's all this criminal action for this thing and these guys who are beating people to hospitalization are getting a slap on the wrist and being told don't do this anymore?
Because sex drives people crazy, and they have focused on the family planning agencies. Think how it is at CPS. If I were to fax over them or call them for every teen that I saw, how can they focus on the truly at-risk teens if I've had to, by statute, refer thousands of teens to them in the year? It makes no sense. So what I wanted to just sort of move on to was, and we can come back to the education thing, because to me the key is what are we teaching them in the schools. I mean, we need.
And what are the mothers teaching them? If that's the case, I'm appalled to hear this, that the mothers are laughing.
We have a huge problem with parents because parents are frightened. And I can't tell you how many parents I see who find out their daughter is sexually active and you would have thought she'd been killed in a car accident and they never see her again. It's like, it's the biggest failure of their life. They feel they have failed. And they're extremely threatened and upset by failing their daughters if their daughters become sexually active. And so there's a huge learning message that needs to go out there because in many, particularly in Hispanic families, that's just not supposed to happen.
Then how come we have the highest rate of teenage pregnancy here?
That's wrong.
Actually, something's wrong with this equation.
Denial.
Okay, denial.
Denial of reality
I'm
isn't only
familiar
in the
with
White
that.
House.
So I included a few slides from a position paper that was put together by the American Academy of Family Physicians, Academy of Pediatrics, ACOG, and Society for Adolescent Medicine, which basically outlines the problem as a provider is you have this obligation to provide the best possible care for teens, including access to reproductive health service. We have an obligation to encourage our teens to involve their parents, and we have an obligation to protect them from predatory, coercive, or inappropriate sexual contact, which is, with the internet, something that everyone takes extremely seriously. But the position basically is that sexual activity and sexual abuse are not synonymous. And that seems like a basic concept, but in this state, both statutorily and in the abstinence program, it is considered almost synonymous. Adolescents who are sexually active need health care and they need counseling. And that means the people who should be able to talk with them and work with them need to feel their licenses and their livelihoods are not jeopardized if they talk to them without referring them to CPS. their position is that by allowing them to seek care is the best way we're going to be able to identify real abuse and really deal with some of the very scary, really unfortunate situations that need to be stopped.
Learning a lot?
I think it's been enjoyable. It's wonderful to get all these people together and to share ideas. It's so good.
Are you volunteering today?
I'm volunteering in a small way here at the end of the day because I didn't want to miss the sessions.
Well, from my experience, what's happening here today, it's the small things that are really making the big things.
Oh, good.
That's what I'm hearing from everybody.
Tenants various emissions and the insurance companies won't reinsure them, so they have to watch them destroyed here.
Boy, that seems like a shame.
It's terrible.
I'd like to drive off in one of these things. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the sound of a crushed automobile being shredded into a million pieces.
There's no precedent for a car company rounding up every one of a particular kind of car and crushing them as if they're afraid they might get away.
I don't think they wanted to be sure that none of them were driving around the streets anymore to remind me.